Okay, hello everyone. I'm Markus Schulz, Max Weber Center for Advanced Cultural and Social Studies and New School. It's my pleasure to open today's webinar on generative artificial intelligence in the research process of scholars and students. Is it a tool and a co-contributor? Generative AI has existed for several years. But it is only recently that it took off to become something like a tsunami. It affects essentially all spheres of life: the economy, work, culture, and politics. It is bound to require much of our research attention for years to come. Today, we want to just humbly focus on the role of generative AI within the process of our own social research and teaching. Now, what is generative AI? Gen AI can be defined as systems that learn patterns from databases and large language models to produce texts, images, videos, and code. ChatGPT is perhaps the most well-known example. Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, and DeepSeek are others. The accelerating adoption of such tools in academic research have sparked huge debates about their benefits and risks, their scope and limitations, as well as about fundamental issues such as transparency, scientific accountability, misinformation, and inherent bias. Given this growing debate about the scope and the ethical use of GenAI, we urgently need to study the empirical evidence about basic questions such as: to what extent and in what modes is GenAI used in the research processes? What specific potential risk and opportunities loom in these various types and modes of usage? When is GenAI an empowering tool, and when does it become an actor of its own? How should academic institutions approach, promote, restrict, or regulate the use of GenAI in research and in teaching? How can we compare the experience from different institutions and countries? And perhaps also, how can we form a transnational network for exchange and systematic study of these issues? Before we delve into the thick of the debate, we wish to thank Alison Loconto, the ISA Vice President for Research, for her initiative to make this webinar series possible, where all the research committees, working and thematic groups can meet. We want to thank Cecilia Rodriguez Molina for all her help in making all this possible. We want to express special thanks to the hosting committees of today's edition: Research Committee 07 on Futures Research, RC 17 on the Sociology of Organizations, RC 21 Urban and Regional Development, RC 33 Logic and Methodology in Sociology, RC 36 Alienation Theory and Research. Big thanks go to Inga Gaitzauskaite, whose immense organizational skill and foresight and vision helped us to stay on track throughout the planning of this webinar. Lutfu Nahalata, who is researching these issues from the Australian Asian hemisphere. Both will take over as our moderators. It's exciting to have today with us both pioneers of empirical research as well as leading theorists from across highly diverse fields of social research, bringing together the expertise from the global north and south. So we are happy to welcome Aisha Naz Ansari, the well-known expert from the Aga Khan University in Pakistan, Jens Peter Andersen, whose team based at Aarhus University in Denmark did the world's first and still unsurpassed survey on Gen AI in university research. Oscar Fontanelli Espinosa and Ligia Tavera Fenollosa from the pioneering Latin American research team at Flaxo, Mexico. Unfortunately, Dirk Michel Schertges from Alienation Research, who had been working on the webinar since the very outset, cannot be with us due to a severe flu. And with this, I can turn over to Michael Grotehammer, Professor of Organizational Sociology at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, who will provide us with a first kick-off presentation on what do university students actually do with ChatGPT in their studies. After his presentation, Inga Geitzauskaite will be moderating the question and answers on this before then we go to the next block of speakers and discussions. So turning over to Inga and our opening kickoff speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus, and I think so. Lutfun will be chairing the discussion, and I just welcome Michael to present his kickoff speech, and we can continue with discussion.
Yes, thanks a lot, Inga. Also, hello and welcome from me. Very happy that I get the opportunity, the chance to kick us off, talking about what university students do with ChatGPT. So the original plan was that Dirk talks about more the research side and I talk more about the teaching side. So the kickoff is a little bit teaching biased now. Keep that in mind that the further we go, the more we get into balance. So let me talk a little bit about teaching by sharing like a quick presentation with you and talk about what I do today. So, well, this didn't work, did you? Okay, so this is based on like an ongoing research. You can, if you're interested, you can read the preprint. Unfortunately, it's not published yet in a journal, but hopefully soon. And what did we do? So did we do in the study? So it's basically that we did like focus group interviews at a university with university students, very open, very exploratory. And well, I only have 10 minutes. Short version is we had a special study design that also allowed us to talk about the more nasty stuff they do. So they shared also their like experiences you would not share with your teachers and examiners, which of course is part of like the interesting stuff here. So long story short, what we did is then we identified generalized practices using practice theory to like get a better sense of like what students actually do there. And this is basically the overview we have, where we come up with distinctive practices, and we thought this might be a nice kickoff, talking a little bit on a more generalized level with like what do students really do with that? And yeah, so let's have a look. So I will basically go through these practices. The first one we identified is AI as a support tool, which is like well, the most underwhelming one, I guess, which is basically this idea where like, well, you use the AI as you would have used a dictionary or an encyclopedia or like an annotated edition of a book, or like these companion books most of us know from like teaching experience, copy, language editing, translations, literature search, and so on. So basically like all these tools that, well, were there before, but now you do it with this chatbot. And just to give you an example from our interviews, so you can just copy and paste, translate Middle High German. It was a German university, maybe that's interesting context. Middle High German into High German, which apparently is a thing. And then he'll give you the translation. Very important in German for some reason, ChatGPT is always male. So he'll give you the translation, which isn't quite right, and that's exactly the point. Relying on it would be absolutely fatal. You shouldn't do that under any circumstances. He translates it for you, and then at least you already know which way it's going. And when you look at it again, you can see for yourself, okay, that's right, that's not right, that's not right, but it makes it easier for you to read, which already gives you a good indication of what we also saw a lot in when we studied that this like, well, you still need the competence to assess what you get as a student, and that they are very aware of that. And this is one of these examples where it's like, yeah, it translates it for me, but I can't just take that. So The other practice we identified is what we call AI as a learning facilitator or tutor, which is basically the idea that you use the AI chatbot, like ChatGPT or Gemini, or Microsoft Copilot for that matter, as you would use like a good supervisor or a good tutor in a way. So you get feedback, you ask for like, oh, can you explain that to me in a way that I actually understand that? Or like, oh, do you have some inspiration? I don't know what I want to write about. Can you give me some inspirations? Denkanstöße in German. Or like, can you give me like an idea of like how this should look like as an outline? Yeah. And like, oh, can you give me a topic? I don't know what I'm writing about. So all these things you would usually maybe discuss with your supervisor or with like a fellow student. Well, that's obviously also what many students now also do with the AI. So here just an example to like get an idea of how that looks like. If I have to write an essay and need a research question, but I have so many research questions in my head and so many topics, then I ask ChatGPT in that direction. That is a research question that particularly engages me. Whether that is a good research question, whether it can be expanded further, or whether he can give me other examples or similar research questions so that I then have a few more ideas that I can focus on, and then he lists me 10 questions, for example, and then I sort of mix all the ones that I like best. So very interactive approach with the AI, or like classic, put the whole text block back in and say, yes, how does it look? Do I get an A? So 1.0 in German for that. And then the AI basically gives you feedback. I'm not sure if that works, but they do it. Then, of course, the one thing we see a lot about in the debate and in the media, that is this thing that we call AI is the sole author, which is basically that, well, you let the chatbot produce the text and then you copy paste it and just submit it. And at least in our sample, which of course is qualitative, so it's like we can't make any substantial quantitative claims, but in our sample they barely do this, and there are also reasons for this. Not that they wouldn't talk about it. I will show you a couple more examples later where like they had no concerns sharing with us, but there are good reasons for that I will come back to. But to give you one example about this copy pasting we have in our data is, well, there are weekly submissions in some courses, and that's just because the lecturers really want to annoy you sometimes. That's effort that they don't look at. I'm sure you heard that before. I just copied it. It's really copy paste because I think it's just rude. So then you just enter the question into ChatGPT. Exactly. So this is an example where like, well, they do it, but in this case, it's a good example for like, well, the students did it because they assumed that the lecturer wouldn't actually check the content. So I think this is a good example where we find this in situations where like the students would assume nobody checks that. What we found more is what we call AI as a first author, and then the student as a second author. So it's basically the same as before, but then the student doesn't copy paste the output from the AI textbook, but revises it, modifies it, and then submits it. So it's basically the AI gives you an output, and the AI is the first author in a way, but then the student works further with the text. So we call that first author AI, second author student. And here are some examples. So the question was somehow, present what your teaching profession is in English. Present what your teaching profession in English will be like later. We had 15 minutes to do it, and we had to write 400 words. So I asked ChatGPT and said, can you somehow write me a 400-word text in English? And then the text came out immediately. I read it through, changed a few words, reverted it a bit, changed the sentence structure, and then I handed it in and passed. It was the online exam for medieval studies, and I was in a hotel. I had to make it a priority when the exam was on Saturday. Okay, then I'll go there on Friday. I'll do it in the hotel in the morning, and then I go to the stadium. So it was a soccer thing here. It was one of those things. Student actually said that. And then I was sitting there in my hotel room. Then I was kicked out by room service. Then I was sitting there in the hotel lobby, and then there was a question at the end. So imagine, like, the students still doing like the online exam, and then there was a question at the end where you had to do a full text. Then I tried it, ChatGPT, and it actually worked quite well. You simply rewrote it, but I essentially knew what the answer was. That's why I always find it trustworthy, but only if you know what the answer really is. So they shared stuff like this with us. And then the last thing of these practices we found is basically the other way around. So what we call AI as second author, and then the student as the first author. So, and this is what we found is when the student themselves comes up with the original idea or with the argument or with the contents and then uses the chatbot to write it up, basically. So in a way that you would like sometimes work with the co-author where like, oh, you have like the original idea, but you need someone to like really work on the text to make it work. And this we found, for example, I wrote 2 pages and needed a third. I merged my entire block from the 2 pages, so the text block, and then put it into ChatGPT and then said, please extend the text to an extra 1,000 words. Then he simply expands the content of what is already there onto 3 pages, and it is exactly the same as what was there before. Also for the conclusion, it is best to copy-paste the main part and introduction together, which the student writes themselves, and then enter them in the ChatGPT and say, make me a really hot conclusion. And another one, I'm going towards 10 minutes, so I will finish very soon. I have all these Faust lectures, so I listened to the lectures, made my key points, then told ChatGPT to write a text using only my key points. It worked perfectly. So I think I will cut this, this quote here. So coming back to this is what we also try to basically match a little bit with these practices, where it's like, well, support tool, learning facilitator usage, that's mostly okay. I mean, students have been using copy editing services before and have discussed stuff with people before. Of course, the sole author and first author thing is not okay, but one of our main takeaways is like, well, if you use AI as a second author and the student is the first author, we don't have a really good answer to this. And one last slide before I go, just to mention it. Yes, we also had cases in our sample where students would not use AI. And this, I think, is for me also one of the takeaways. To give you like one last quote, if you focus on the quote down, like the second one, my inner voice told me, be proud of yourself. You wrote that yourself. Super. And I think with these words, this might be my input presentation. And I like this last one because it's also about like some students really saying, no, I have my own voice. I don't want to have that taken away from the AI. Thank you very much. I hope that was like a good input to get some idea of like, what are they doing with that?
Thank you very much, Michael, for the wonderful presentation. So I think I'll take the chair's privilege and ask you one question first, and then open the session for everyone else to ask question. So my first question is, I think it didn't get much time to speak about your methods and how you did kind of collect data. So if you could tell us a little bit about like whether you collect data from your own university, other universities, a bit on methodology and your positionality, maybe your group members, and then I'll open question for others. Thanks.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yeah, the methodology was that, so we already had a study running where we like did interviews in these focus groups about like learning practices. So what do you actually do when you learn for university? And then at some point we had this opportunity to add this question, oh, and how about ChatGPT? And like part of the study design was that we did not do it at our own university. So I'm in Norway, one of my co-authors is in Norway, and most interviews we did in Germany at the university. So of course, we reassured the students like everything you tell us here is a safe space and we don't share it. But it had a special weight because we could also say like, well, we don't actually work here. So everything you tell us, like, we don't actually care. So that helped a lot in building trust. And then like the other part was that we like basically talked for an hour about like learning practices, like what do you do, how do you actually learn. And then when we were talking and they had built trust towards the end, adding this question, what about ChatGPT? And then very often they kind of like almost as if they have been waiting for the question. So this was like this two-part design we had there where like this really helped us to open up there. Yes.
Thank you, Michael. And how many interviews or focus groups have you done as part of this project?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, I mean, like the overall project, we have, let's see, like we have 34 focus groups overall with more than 100 students, but like the specific ChatGPT one for now is 15 focus groups with 61 students.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Is there any question from the audience or maybe, like organizers? You can raise your hand or you can just unmute yourself and ask question. Yes, Inga, go for it.
Yes, thank you, Michael, very much. I have a lot of questions, but I think one of these, because we don't have Dirk here, and we wanted to connect this topic, you know, the link between teaching, learning, and also doing research. And do you think from your focus groups you can get some hints on the influences of what students are doing right now for the future when they are becoming, you know, young researchers? So how the use of ChatGPT or any generative AI would influence, and do you see, you know, any risks in their current learning practices towards the future of them as researchers?
Yes, thanks. I think that's an excellent question because like the cohorts we interviewed, I don't think they are particularly at risk for now. That was pretty clear for us because like they already had studied a couple of years before they had the chance to use ChatGPT. So they already knew how to learn. And then ChatGPT was this thing that comes on top. And then for them, it was like, well, but I still need to acquire the skills. Like it doesn't help me if I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm not sure, but this is speculation. And of course, there's a lot of work on that, like how this will evolve over time. Like we know from research on schools that it's not particularly good. But I also learned a lot from these interviews, I have to say. Like a lot of stuff I have tried out, like a lot of stuff also doesn't work, but some stuff is really helpful. Not in terms of like letting ChatGPT write the text for you, but a couple of stuff I actually adopted from these interviews. So I think there's also this like thing where we can learn from them. And I think that last thing I would like to say there is like it creates this tension now between students and us as teachers, where like students expect very often that we like give them guidance on how to use that, whereas like very often they actually know much more about that than we ourselves, and we can learn more from them. And I think like we have to talk about also how to figure out like how can we maybe make that like a productive dialogue there. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. I think Alison has her hands up, and then Lydia. Alison,
yes, thank you so much. This was really interesting, Michael. I really enjoyed the feedback that you got from the students, and I was wondering if because it was inspired by the hotel / football quotation. Did any of the students kind of talk about in the focus groups how they changed the way in which they're organizing their time and their studies because of this AI? Thank you.
Yeah, Like some students, like this is in our sample is extremely heterogeneous. Like some students like use it like very effectively. For instance, use like the chatting functions. Like they use chat PDF or like Notebook LM, where you can chat with the PDF very extensively, and then like they develop a system where like they have 2 or 3 screens, like chatting in different tasks on different screens. Like some of them, like even like they make their own notes and then chat with their notes. So some figure out like extremely productive workflows even. And on the other hand, you have these students who are like, no, I'm not touching that at all. I don't want that. I'm really afraid that it will change my voice. And in between, you have a lot ranging from, oh, I think it's really, really bad. So it's also interesting, like you have 2 narratives at the same time. The one narrative is everybody uses it for everything. And the other narrative is, oh, it's really, really evil and bad to use it, so you shouldn't use it at all. And somehow you have a situation right now where like this kind of coexists, and then depending on what narrative influences you the most, you are impacted in different ways. Yeah, not sure if this answers the question, but yeah.
Thanks, Michael. That's really interesting. So I think Lygia has a question. Yeah, Lygia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. I would like to ask you about 3 topics, 3 things. One is, did you come up with a discussion about the quality of education and how the quality of education is being changed or challenged by artificial intelligence? Because we encountered that in Mexico. Some students were against using generative artificial intelligence because they expected to be learning from humans, from people, and they thought that the quality of education was not as good as with the traditional human, not machine-based learning. That's one thing. Then another thing is, did you discuss about academic performance? Does the academic results, the academic performance of students improves with ChatGPT, and how do they feel about that? Because there is a tension, as you mentioned, between yeah, maybe I'm having better grades, but I'm not learning that much, sort of tension. And the third thing I would like to ask you about is the regulation of the use of artificial intelligence in the classroom. Maybe you can share some thoughts about that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks a lot. So we did not talk intensively about the quality of education because of like the study design we have, where we focus really on like the students' practices, where this of course also plays a role, but like that was a little bit detached. The academic performance, again, like it's a qualitative study design, so we don't have like any like propositional statements on that, but we have insights that are very mixed. So some students actually also shared experience where they used AI, and the result was so bad that they actually didn't failed. Which was then, it's one of these stories that are very important for these narratives about like, no, you still need to actually know what you're doing, otherwise it doesn't help. And then you have this experience from students where like it actually didn't help because they didn't know what they were doing, and then the AI also doesn't help you. So it's like, so in terms of like academic performance, we don't have like any super clear statements. How do they feel about? Like this is more what we can say about is that, well, they're very reflexive, most of them. Like it's like very reflexive in terms of like some students were like very clear, yeah, I could use it now to like make it more easier for me to pass in this course, but then later when I have to write my master thesis, it doesn't help me. I still have to do that on my own. like a lot of students are very reflexive. That's what we take away, and then they feel very differently about the use of AI. Like some students hate it, some students love it, and everything in between. And the regulation is actually where we have like the like very strong takeaways, at least in our paper. Not sure if I have the time to share them, but this is what we discuss intensively, like the implications from like looking at these more from this practice-based perspective, whereas like when you look at that way, for instance, like one implication we see is that like fraud detection tools might actually not only be useless, sondern, sorry, that was a weird German word in between, but also counterproductive in terms of is like most of these ways we saw that are problematic in how they use it, so that they rewrite the output or they like co-author, is like that stuff that is undetectable by these fraud detection tools when you look at the literature. And the one thing that would be detectable in theory is the copy paste thing, which they tend to apparently not do that as often as we might think, because they know that there are detection tools that can detect that. Whereas like acceptable usage, so there's like some literature on that. I think no real cases so far, but like in theory it is like if you use AI, for example, for like heavy language editing, then your text sounds AI, although it's not at all. It's just like it's language editing, as we would use it, as I book it all the time, I pay for it all the time for my articles. And then of course it's not AI, but it sounds like AI, and then it might actually get falsely flagged. So this is one of the insights. We also have a couple of other policy implications, but I think I talked too much already. But thanks.
Thanks, Michael. I think Kais has a question, so that would be the last question for you. Kais, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for your nice presentation. I have a very simple and straightforward question. Did you find any differences in AI use pattern when we talk about in terms of the students' background? For example, did you find any difference between the STEM field students or and social science students? The AI use pattern, difference in AI use pattern. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question, where you can see the limitations of our study design. So it's this qualitative study design where we have 61 students in the sample. Most of them are more from the social sciences, humanities. So we could look at what you said, but not in a meaningful way, because like our study design doesn't allow that. And also like we were more interested in like trying to derive like the more generalized practices. And then in the next step, I fully agree. That's something I would like to see, or maybe even do, is like trying to then look at this specifically, because I suspect that there are like huge differences. Obviously, like if you do information technology, for example, then you use AI in a very different way, like GitHub Copilot, for example, for coding. Then you use it for like qualitative sociology paper. So I'm very sure there will be substantial differences in the detail, but so far we haven't seen anything that would like bust our like generalized practices. So let's see if that all holds up. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. And I think one of my observations from kind of looking around how people are using AI in different disciplines, each discipline has their own kind of ways to use, and then academics kind of decide whether they would accept or reject that kind of practices. Like business school, they kind of sometimes allow students to use AI. So it would be interesting, like if we do a comparative study, like how different disciplines allow students to use it or students use it. So thanks again very much for your wonderful presentation, and it's a great project. So we are going to move to our three speakers, next three speakers now. So we have now Aisha Naj, I'm sorry, and Jens, And
so
Oscar.
Lutfun, if you want, I can take over from
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
So
yeah. I was going to say
okay.
that Inga is
Yeah,
going to
thank
take
you.
over now, so she's not.
Thank
She's
you.
going to be the moderator.
And really, thank you, Michael and Lutfun, for this engaging kick-off discussion. I think it was really great. And now, as Lutfun already mentioned, we will continue with our next speakers, and that have been already shortly introduced by Marcus at the beginning. And I will also soon put some short bios of them in the chat for you to get to know them better. So we will have Jens Peter Andersen from Denmark, Aisha Nas Ansari from Pakistan, and then Oscar Fontanelli Espinosa with Ligia Tavera Fenolosa from Mexico. So they will each give a short statement, and then we will continue with the main discussion. And the discussion will then be followed by a short question and answer session with the audience, and we will see if it will be with chat or with microphones. So dear Jens, I invite you to start with your statement. So please, the screen is now yours for 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. Some of what I'm going to say is going to mirror what Michael was just talking about with his students, but this is about researchers instead. I want to do this in two parts. The first part being about a survey we did, the other part about some personal reflections from that survey, but also more generally. The survey I'm talking about was a survey that we ran last year among Danish researchers across basically all of science, social science, humanities as well. We recruited from all Danish universities, so it was quite broad. And one of the things we found was, well, we basically found there are three different types of usage. One being as this kind of a workhorse that could help people accelerate, and this is a keyword which I'm not very happy with, but I'll get back to that. Their research, and that was the most common form of using it to somehow improve their work modes. But I think more interesting than that really is that we found one of the most distinguishing factors in how you use generative AI is the knowledge production mode that you are using. So if you're doing engineering research or computer science or something, you already have some established forms of usage, and they're quite different from what you will find in the humanities. There's also a lot more reluctance in the humanities, most of the social sciences, and we also asked them about integrity issues, like how they considered whether a specific task, like we were asking about these phases in the research process. In this phase, this task, how do you assess this in terms of integrity issues? Is this a good thing to do? And there were also quite different answers to that question depending on which field you were in. Some fields thought that fabricating data was an absolutely fine thing to do because the data wasn't the important thing. So fabrication was fine. But in other fields, of course, that would be highly unethical to do. So it depends a lot on which field you're working in. And now I kind of want to get back to this accelerator thing. And this is more my personal opinion now, because this is a term that you see a lot. This AI as the great accelerator. It will speed up science, make human progress exponential, and all of these other celebratory terms. I think this is highly problematic. I think this is the last thing that science needs. And I think any editor out there will agree with me right now that it's becoming more and more impossible to find peer reviewers for all the papers that get sent in. So I don't think this is a solution. We don't need more papers to read either. Instead, I think I want to argue that we should see AI as an amplifier, and amplifier both in positive and negative terms. So if we're doing unethical research in the first place, and or our integrity, the way we use different tools, how we think about the research process is low on the integrity scale, then if we use AI, we will become even lower on the integrity scale. This is a problem, of course. If we are highly ethical persons and we are used to doing research in a good way and we use AI in the same manner, then I don't really see any problem at all. Actually, I think it can improve our research practices. And one of the things I want to mention here is something, I actually saw this mentioned talking about CEOs, but I think it can very easily be transferred to us as researchers. That if you use AI for patting yourself on the shoulder or reaffirming your beliefs, then this is a problem. And that's sort of also how many of the chatbots are designed, that they will just agree with you, that they will reaffirm your opinions. But you can force it to do something else. You can explicitly ask it, challenge my views, give me other evidence. This is how I see the world. These are the references that back up my understanding. Can you find something that opposes this? This is the sort of thing that would be difficult to find otherwise as well. Like if we're doing our literature searches, we're already biased by our own opinions, and if we use AI correctly, it can improve our own reflexivity, which is also an ongoing discussion right now. There's an open letter where a lot of reflexive researchers are calling for the outright rejection of AI as a research tool. And there's a whole other school opposing this. This is a very interesting discussion going on right now, if any one of you is interested in that. Yes, so having this discussion about AI as a naysayer versus a yaysayer, I think is very important. And it feeds into my main point, which is I think that we need to improve our AI literacy. And I also hear that in what Michael is saying, that sometimes the students are actually more AI literate than we are, and we need to embrace it. We need to learn how to use these tools correctly, not just chat with ChatGPT, but actually use them and learn their advantages and their disadvantages, and how it can help us improve research and how it can actually create incredibly dangerous traps for scientific progress. The last thing I want to add to this is more of a conceptual question, because why should AI make us less ethical? I mean, we have many other tools we've seen come into research over the last many years that could have made us less ethical, but they haven't. So why should AI do that? And I'm saying that because a lot of people are expressing this concern that it will make us less ethical. I don't buy it. I think that most researchers are interested in high integrity research because this is a part of our DNA. That's my personal belief. And of course, there are always going to be bad apples, but isn't it also very obvious what they're doing? I mean, and can we not avoid that? Just like we've also been avoiding predatory journals and all sorts of other obviously low integrity research. Yeah, so that to say there's a lot to worry about, but I think there's also a lot of solutions, and I see a bright future ahead if we just stop thinking of AI as an accelerator. Inga, you're muted.
Thank you. I thought, thank you very much for these very well pinpointed insights, and I think they will be very good for our discussion. And now let me invite Aisha Nas with her statement so that we can continue. Please, Aisha.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation and very good afternoon. This is Aisha from Pakistan and currently a student of PhD education at Durham University. Since I'm an educational researcher, so my discussion will be focusing on educational research in specific, which is falling under social sciences. So I'll begin with the existing limitations of educational research, which are ranging from a generic or long-lasting critique on educational research that the evidence it is producing or generating is fragmented because it is relying on small sample size and which is less reliable and is less generalizable because the question of trustworthiness is always there and it is not contributing to the knowledge production or advancement and it is somehow not accessible or if accessible is not interpretable by the users of that evidence, specifically like policymakers or teachers who are supposed to use that evidence. And then within educational research, we are also having a kind of methodological inertia, which is like dichotomous nature of educational research, either quantitative or qualitative, based on supposed paradigms, and we are lacking within those paradigms the robustness or the trustworthiness of the results. And other than that, we are also having like a cognitive and linguistic bias because some parts of the globe are leading the knowledge production part, so there is a kind of cognitive or intellectual bias within the existing evidence that could be due to a slow cycle of publication, and because of that we are having less evidence from countries who are uh, suffering in certain other ways, so we have less evidence from those countries or due to other capacity building issues. And then educational research is also weak in terms of having a kind of data sharing policies or subjective nature of interpretation. So with these existing limitations, we as a researcher are asking questions that is AI, generative AI, accelerating these issues or is a kind of addressing these issues? But the answer is not simple as it seems so. So we'll be catching the response to this question at the end of this presentation. Before moving towards the existing use of AI, I would like to talk about the statistics because there is a rise of higher education students who are using AI for the assessment purposes, which was already mentioned by Michael, that students are relying more on education, more on AI for their like assessment part. Why are they using? Because they have multiple options. They are using it for integration, and researchers are specifically using to have a tool which is integrated in their process of research, from ideation to producing something for dissemination. And because Gen AI is offering promises of efficiency, inclusivity, and creativity, but these offers are limited in certain ways. And Gen AI is also shifting intellectual scholarship with algorithmic scholarship by dehumanizing research and eliminating human connection from research, which was initially led or dominated by human intellect. And it is also amplifying systemic bias because the trained model of Gen AI is generated by some parts of the globe, and which is somehow making threats to academic standards. And that is why ethics in educational research or social sciences research is important, because we as policymakers or practitioners are relying on that evidence which is generated by research. So the question is, should Gen AI be used or not in educational research? But the response should not be simple yes or no binary options. But we as researchers should consider that it is existing and we cannot ban it. We have to learn it we need to learn it in order to have its efficient use in a research processes. So for that, the idea which I am proposing here is that we need to evaluate the AI generated outputs at 4 levels. First is at the idea of epistemic uh, evaluation of the existing or generated outputs of um, Gen AI, so that we can look at the contextual fidelity. Because if the researcher or his or her intellect is missed out from the research, then Gen AI is going to produce whatever is fed in its program. But the research in which a researcher is working is bringing a different context, which might not be familiar to Gen AI. So the epistemic evaluation of the results or of the research side or the research itself is important. Then the methodological evaluation of the kind of conversation or dialogue of researcher and Gen AI tools should also be documented, so that the kind of validation at a human and a Gen AI output should be validated and triangulated. Then the ethical evaluation is important, because sometimes what researchers are doing is that they are generating synthetic data or hallucination within the data set, because it is because they are like they are running in a race of having multiple publications without even going through the process of research. So that is becoming unethical, because then these results are then used by somebody in some parts of the world. So ethical dimensions and transparency of the research process is important. Then reflexivity is important, because Gen AI is there, and we researchers should use it as a critical friend who can help us stimulate our thinking and reflections in the process of research, in a similar way that we take help from our other research colleagues. So with this framework, uh, I am like proposing that the evaluation of Gen AI outputs should move from is it incorrect or incorrect? The binary option is not there, but we as researchers need to think of the idea of defensibility of that output generated by AI as a researcher, to defend it intellectually and ethically, because we researchers are accountable for whatever we have produced in the process or as results. And we are publishing or disseminating with their own means, so we are accountable to defend those results both intellectually and ethically. So with this, I would conclude that Gen AI has potential and it can be used, but with criticality, reflexivity, and equitable ways, which ensure that the educational research is not threatened academically and remain ethical. For this, we can have Gen AI and human working in collaboration, where human is taking the position of like leader and dominating or leading the process, where Gen AI is a kind of reflexive partner who can assist in a way that otherwise a human assistant was providing assistance. But it should not replace the interpretation and the kind of processes which were either led only by humans. So the replacement option is not there, but it can become a critical partner or reflexive partner of our human researchers. Thank you.
Dear Aisha, thank you very much for this concise overview and your input to our forthcoming discussion. And now I want to invite Oscar and Lihia. So please, the screen and microphones are yours, and please your statement.
Can you see my presentation there?
It is loading, so I hope we will see it soon.
Todavía no, pero.
Yes, now we can see it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Ligia. And I will share an experience that we have had here in Mexico in the recent months, and I am sure that it will dialogue with the finding and insights of Michael and Jens Peter regarding a survey that we conducted on the use of GenAI tools by our students and by the members of our faculty here in Flaxo. In Flaxo, Mexico, just to give some context, Flaxo, Mexico is the Mexican campus of an international organization for research and graduate student studies in social science in Latin America and the Caribbean. And Flaxo Mexico is a relatively small institution with around 35 full-time faculty members and something like 300 students. All of them are graduate students in several master programs and one doctoral program. And like many higher education institutions worldwide, we are deeply interested in the emergence of these generative AI tools and understanding how we should both regulate its use and train students and faculty to use these tools efficiently and ethically. But we realize that we need a much wider and deeper understanding on uh, how much and in which ways are our students and our colleagues using these kinds of tools and for what specific purposes, and what do they think about it. So in order to gather more information, and together with several colleagues, Professor Schultz here among them, we conducted a survey on the use, perception, and assessment of GenAI tools within our community. For this, we adapted the questionnaire that Jens Peter and his team applied in Denmark to our specific context here in Flaxo, Mexico. And the target populations were the whole academic faculty and the graduate students body. We preserve these three dimensions of use, perception, and assessment of GenAI tools in research and also in teaching and in coursework. Specifically for students, we added an open-ended question on how do you use GenAI tools in your classes. Well, we have many interesting findings from this survey, but today we want to focus on the responses of this open-ended question, how students use it for their classes, and related questions of the questionnaire, and also to give some context. One specific feature of Flaxo Mexico is a significant emphasis on quantitative methods. Our curriculum includes calculus, mathematical modeling, statistics, and a substantial component of programming in R, specifically for almost all of our students. And each year, we admit students with highly diverse backgrounds, ranging from anthropology to economics and from sociology to political science, which means that we typically observe a wide variation in their initial quantitative preparation, especially in these courses, because, well, what results tell them and what the students are telling us is that they are using these tools specifically for these purposes. But now my colleague, Professor Ligia Tavera Fenollosa, will tell us a bit more about the findings.
Thank you so much, Oscar, for this first part of our presentation. Let me just say that all our programs are in the social sciences. So we teach all these mathematics and statistics, but it's sociology, political science, public policy, and population studies that we teach at Flaxo. Okay, well then, based on these open-ended responses to the open-ended questions, we decided to move on and have a focus group with the teachers of these very particular courses on math and statistics. All our students, as Oscar was saying, have to take those courses, and they have one course in math, but they have several courses in statistics, especially statistics for social sciences. So what I will be discussing is the different approaches that teachers and students have regarding the use of generative AI in the classroom for these particular disciplines. What we found is that given this gap among students related to their background in statistics and mathematics, we found that the highest use students make of especially ChatGPT, but Gemini and other tools also, is to kind of try to leveling the gap and compensate for the things they do not know in terms of their background in mathematics. So it's the highest use for these specific practices, for these specific activities. The use in programming, Oscar was saying, in R, basically, and they have the most positive perceptions and the greatest perceived learning gains. So students feel and think and use artificial intelligence for better understanding of mathematical problems, for getting explanations from the chat box regarding problem solving and formulas and that sort of things. And they use it particularly for coding and debugging and understanding problems related to coding in R. So this is a very heavy use of the artificial intelligence for these very specific tasks for students in social sciences. So what we were wondering is if this tool can level the playing field for students. But the faculty has a very, because they feel that they are learning more, they are understanding more, they are improving their performance in those particular topics. But then the faculty has a very, very different perspective on how this tool is helping or not helping the students. They distinguish between two types of students, and this is related to what we were listening before on the ethics of using this type of tool. Students that use it ethically and students that cheat. That's one distinction that they make. And in terms of very specific results, we found that the usage depends on the nature of the discipline, and we saw difference between mathematics and statistics, and it also depends. It's a function of the prior level of conceptual preparation. So I don't know if can I talk a little bit more? I didn't keep track
yes,
of that. Okay, but
yes, couple of more minutes, definitely, yes.
Okay, so this depends on these two variables: the content of the course and the prior conceptual preparation of students. But I think one of the important issues that triggers from this second part of our research is the very different views that students and teachers have regarding the use of generative AI in the classroom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oscar and Ligia, for sharing research insights from Mexico. Again, another piece to our puzzle that I think we are building today on this topic. And all presenters gave diverse but also very interconnected statements and coming from different scientific fields and contexts. And I think this builds a very good foundation for our discussion to follow. So now I invite all the speakers, and let's not forget Michael as well, to join the discussion. And I will start with the first question, and I address the question to all of you, but I think it stems from what Jens Peter ended his statement, saying that we should see generative AI as an amplifier, but both in a positive and a negative sense, right? So it can amplify something good and at the same time something wrong. And so how do we ensure that this amplification works toward a more positive direction, enhancing research process rather than having some detrimental consequences in a sense? And Jens Peter also mentioned like the improvement of AI skills as a part of it. So my question is, so where does the responsibility lie? Who and how should be the one or ones taking the leadership and responsibility for the positive amplification in this regard? So maybe Jens Peter can start, but then others are welcome to join the discussion.
Thanks. I completely agree. This this is something that we cannot just let be open for everybody to do as they want. We need to have some kind of institutions around this. I do think that every researcher has, of course, a personal responsibility towards their own practice, no doubt about that. But I think exactly something like the ISA, but also our own universities have responsibilities towards establishing norms around this. And I think norms is really what we need. We have been discussing norms in science at least since the 1950s. We should continue doing that when things like this arise. And of course, we need research into that. So some of you people, some of my wonderful colleagues who do integrity research, who do sociology of science, who this is where we need to learn more about what is actually a good way of moving forward with this to ensure that we are doing still good science that is bounded in human values, but that operationalizes these tools in the most, I wouldn't say efficient, effective manner.
Thank you, Jens Peter. Would any other speakers like to continue on this question?
Yes, Inga, if I may.
Yes, please.
I would like to come back to this acceleration versus amplification issue. And as Michael was saying in his presentation, the focus groups he conducted were with students, or that's what I understood, with students that already had certain learning practices. So there were students that did not start their education with these tools. They were before that. That's the main point. And then Jans was talking about researchers that already have some trajectory and some previous education and values and so forth. But I was wondering that about people, students and researchers, very young researchers and students that started, in a sense, started up with these tools in place. So we have a very different context, because you amplify something that is there, and it can be positive or negative. But I'm talking about the previous stage. How do we, as teachers, as researchers, how do we build what is there to be then amplified in a positive or negative way? So yeah, I would like to add that to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Michael, yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I find this very important and fascinating. I also kind of got stuck on the amplifier because like the more I think about it, I wonder like that I think that's very adequate. So like when you look at these practices we identified among students, for example, I don't think that these AI tools actually offer anything particularly new in terms of this hasn't been there before. Like, oh, you had like before you had learning facilitators, supervisors, fellow students, maybe you even paid someone for that. Now you do it with AI, or like, oh, you use AI to write something. Well, paper mills, ghostwriting, like that has been a problem for some time already, and all the other stuff we found. So I like when I think about it, I think this idea that like this is amplifying the good stuff and the bad stuff. So I wonder, but this is more of a question, like are we maybe with generative AI more and more reaching a point where like certain problematic things we see will become so amplified that we actually will see some kind of big bang in certain fields, where it's like, well, we have had this problem of like a lot of research output, like incentivizing to like write it, like put out as many papers as possible, and then publishers taking advantages of that and so on. And now it's like and this is amplifying. Like maybe, so I wonder, like, are we reaching a point where AI will push certain things to a certain limit? That's a question I have now coming from your presentations. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. And I see Oscar raises the hand to continue. Please, Oscar.
Thanks. And continuing with this idea of amplification of both positive and negative aspects, I'm thinking about how this occurs among students. As we mentioned, there is this gap, and I'm thinking about two typical students in the classroom. One of them who has good study habits and normally exercises critical and deep thinking abilities, and the other student does not. and they both discovered that these GenAI tools, and then they can use it for their coursework. So one of them, and this is something that we observed here in Mexico, completely relies on GenAI to give, for example, in mathematical courses, step-by-step solutions, and completely relies on ChatGPT, for example, to write some code and to analyze data and interpret results. And the other student does not use it in this same way, but more critically, more as Michael said, as a learning facilitator. And my concern is that uh, by the end of this stage of their education, these initial gaps that they had will be wider. And that is a concern that I have as a teacher.
Mhm, mhm.
Thank you, Oscar. And now we have a line of discussants wanting to get involved. So Ligia first, then Aisha, and then Jens Peter. Ligia, please.
Thank you, Inga. Very, very shortly. And this is related to what Aisha was telling about the inequalities and the risk of deepening those inequalities. But I just want to throw the idea that how can, or the question that, how can we use these tools to reduce the inequalities, the gaps? Because students perceive, not teachers, but students, some of them perceive that they are really catching up with other students that have better backgrounds in mathematics and statistics. So they are, for them, it's been very, very, very helpful. I didn't read the quotes from the students, but we have plenty of quotes that lead us in that direction. It's helping to reduce the gaps. That's it.
Thank you, Ligia. And Aisha, please.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I think it is amplifying at various ways. First and foremost is that we need to understand who is behind the programming of Gen AI. If that is only led by technologists or uh, coding experts, then we need to think who is making decisions. And if students who are not, who might have understanding of it, Gen AI and its algorithms and how is it working behind, so they should have a better understanding or evaluation power on the generated outputs. And the other one is that we also need to understand that if one group is having this access to Gen AI, then the other group is deprived. There is a digital divide even existing now, but if we are introducing Gen AI without even trying it out and testing the tool itself, and having a kind of consequences of the tool itself, we are introducing it without testing, so we are creating harm for the users because we are introducing something without its evidence. Similar, we can see it in a medicine way, that if a medicine is or pill is introduced, that is tested, and that is tested with positive results, and then it is introduced or prescribed to the users or the patient. So we need to like look at its uh, testing part first, and then we should introduce it, considering that there is a marginalized group who is deprived even now. So if the group is further deprived after having this kind of tool, is a kind of another issue. Then we also need to look at how educational authorities are regulating and who is their representative in the Gen AI industry. If there is none from the education or social science background, then the decisions are made by aliens for us, because we are researchers of this dimension only. So we need to consider these aspects as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha, so much. And Jens Peter, please.
Thank you. First of all, that was a really good point, Aisha. I think that's very important. I wanted to comment on what Michael was saying about where we're going to see this kind of over amplification first. And I think we're already seeing some signs of this happening. I was mentioning editors having a very hard time finding reviewers. And it's actually gotten to the point now that where I've seen two different editorials where different editors are suggesting that there should be some kind of a speed bump on how many papers you're actually allowed to publish per year. I'm not sure. I think this is exactly the solution we're in need of, but I think it's very, very telling that we're seeing this coming from editors. I have not seen that before, and I have been involved in research in that for 15 years. So I'm quite surprised to see that happening now. And I think this is interesting.
Thank you, Jens Peter. And Michael, yes, please. I suppose you want to add up on this.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting point with like the editors speaking up. I mean, I also have colleagues. I also have been that suggesting internally to like at least like put some kind of cap on the incentives. So we have internal incentives also to like not very much. So just to be clear, we are not talking about a French business school incentives or anything. Like, it's very low incentives, but like we are incentivized to publish basically, and like we have colleagues and me as well like suggesting caps on that, like to at least like not give like extra incentives at least. Not saying you're not allowed to, but like at least we don't motivate you to like publish, I don't know, 10 papers per year. So, but I think that what I found interesting about the editors is like two things. The one thing is that I have been an editor for a couple of years, and there as well, like it's not a particularly new phenomenon that you receive AI generated papers. Like that has been a problem for years already before ChatGPT, because there have been like a lot of people who were already able of like leveraging these large language models to do that. But I think what we see here now is that what I think what Aisha said about like the democratization. Like the problem itself is not particularly new, but now it's available for everyone, and suddenly you have this amplification, maybe because also of the democratization, right? Like I found this a super interesting point that I wanted to comment on.
Thank you, Michael. And if I may, I will move to one more question, which actually came both from Aisha's presentation and then from her comment and everything. So it somehow led me to the question of trust in science and research. So what implications do we have here for that? Meaning, how can we trust generative AI usage for research? Because at the moment, I think we constantly have to be suspicious about how it works and what it does and what consequences we have. But also, how can we trust research that is, to an extent, co-created with generative AI, right? So what would be your takes on that? Maybe Aisha can start, but then, of course, others please join in.
Thank you so much. This is really interesting question and has been debated for years and years in education, especially. The idea of having trustworthy results is important because educational research is then leading to decisions of policies and practices, and we are relying on the evidence available. For that, like I'm working with my supervisors, and he has introduced a kind of approach that is there to assess the evidence, the existing evidence. So I think we need to have a kind of checklist or a kind of criteria to assess the available evidence on which we are making any decision or are citing it. So we need to cater with those issues within the existing evidence in order to trust those results. For that, I think we need to see that the sample and the transparency is there. Like if we are seeing that this thing is having a potential impact on that thing, so what is the evidence or what is a proof of that warrant which we are generating? So we need to have data sharing, transferability for researchers to come up with. So I think that could be one of the possible ways, but it is not the only solution. There are multiple other solutions, and Gen AI is becoming a wicked problem which is having various other solutions and can be designed in the process of exploring its applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. And Jens Peter, please.
Yes, I like the word trust here. I was going to say something about that as well. Namely that there was a paper not very long ago where they discussed disclosing AI in your paper and found that actually it lowered trust when you did that compared to if you didn't disclose it. And that is extremely problematic that we have this kind of situation. And I think that it is actually kind of counterintuitively fueled by some of the regulations that have been made around AI and disclosing it, because I don't think it's very fruitful that we have to disclose, let's say, everything. If I ping pong one idea with AI, do I then have to disclose that I used AI to create the study? Is that really what we want? Or is it when I have used it more substantially? I think this is the kind of thing that we want to know, right? Also, the cheaters are probably not going to disclose it anyway in any case. So I'm not saying I have the solution here, but I think we need to at least discuss how we want to disclose AI and how do we receive that in the community reading the papers, instead of just saying you have to disclose everything or you can't use it at all.
Thank you, Jens Peter. Do we have other speakers who would like to comment on this question?
Just briefly, sorry, I'm sorry, you raised your hand.
So yeah, maybe Ligia, you can start. You started to talk, and then Oscar.
Okay. I think this is what Jans just told us about disclosing the using of artificial intelligence and lowering the trust. It's very interesting because we've been betting on transparency, right? Like being transparent about how, when, and for what purposes we've used it. And it's shocking to me, it's only a comment, it's shocking to me to see that trust goes down, not up, with transparency rules. Yeah.
Thank you, Ligia. Oscar, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think that this matter of trust depends a lot on the field of study and the kind of science that we are talking about. I'm thinking about the example of electronic calculators as a tool. There is some complicated calculation that needs to be done, and one person does it alone by himself or herself, and another person with the aid of an electronic calculator. I would personally trust more on the result of the person that utilized an electronic calculator, just because I know that these machines do these specific tasks better than humans. And I think that there may be, in this specific context, complicated tasks that GenAI can do better and in a more trustable way than people. So I think that in some fields and for some specific tasks in mathematics or in physics or in chemistry, for example, trust may rise by the use of these GenAI tools, given that we or assuming that we understand what they are doing. But in other kind of science and in social science and humanity, it is much more complex, I think, obviously.
Thank you, Oscar. And I see Michael also would like to contribute here.
Thank you. Thanks. Like this disclosure thing, like we discussed that also for students, and like like we are very skeptical about that. Like it's one of these solutions that are like for many like immediately logical. It's like, oh yeah, let's just have them disclose the usage, and then this is a good way. And like we are very skeptical about that. And what you just mentioned, Jens Peter, is like really adding to this. It's like that's basically like mirrors our argument. It's like, oh, if you flag that as like, oh, a help of AI, it really lowers, it really has an impact. So we are skeptical about that. But in research, I also wonder, now that you said that, like in terms of like how we work, in terms of like how to disclose that, like when you think about methodology, like there we used to disclose how we got to certain results. Like I, as a qualitative researcher, like this is very important. Like you disclose like the process to produce credibility. Like what is your positionality? What impacted your position? What and so on. So you disclose all that, and that's part of like this process and the methodology. But we are not really used to disclosing our like the help and support we got in our writing process, right? Like maybe we thank like the reviewers and the editor and maybe a couple of colleagues in some kind of acknowledgement, but we don't usually disclose about like, oh yeah, in the writing process, like I got like a very important inspiration from this colleague at this point, and then this term I use actually was thrown in from a colleague in the corridor. Like we don't disclose that, and maybe that's actually not that good, because coming back to this, like really coming back to this point of like what is originality in what we write, and how much fiction is already in this idea of like that the author is like the main original author behind an idea. Now AI is really making like some things like very obvious in this respect. Also an amplification maybe. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I had one more question, but I see that by the time we need to give some floor for our audience, because they have been really patient for almost 2 hours now. And so I see Victoria raising a hand, so please ask your question, and then I will later read another question from the chat. So we will see if we can have some more. So Victoria, please, your question.
Thank you very much for opportunity to be here and to listen such a very interesting and very valuable presentations. Actually, I have just one addition, not a question exactly, because we recently at our university, and I'm working at the High School of Economics in Moscow. So we have recently done some research on what students' disclosure when they tell that they do AI implementation at their works. So their answers are close to what you have found, but for example, they say that they use it for, yes, for translation, for example, for structuring the master thesis or PhD thesis, and for generating data, as already we have known from the discussion. But speaking about trust, also it was discovered in our research that it just happened that when we mark students' master dissertations, it happens that excellent marks are getting the works that do not use AI. It just happens, you know, it's not strong connection statistically, but in more cases, excellent marks are given for those works that has not been disclosed AI usage, and less marks for those that disclose. So it's really interesting connection, kind of connection with, and it was the quantitative research based on quantitative study. So this is the result close to the idea of disclosure and trust.
Thank you, Victoria. And I don't know if our speakers would like to react to it, or if I can ask a next question. Okay, so I will ask the next question, and then we see if a common answer comes. So I have a question. Sorry, difficult to see. Just a moment. There's too many screens here. Does any of the presenters have some insights regarding how artificial intelligence affect research as a collaborative process and practice? It's a question from Vladimir. So if any of our speakers would like to react to that.
Before the speakers address it, I think that question has two components. If I just intersect that, one is collaboration between the human and the AI, but the other potential dimension of that same question is, how does it impact the collaborative research between the humans?
Michael, please.
Yes, if nobody else wants to answer, because the caveat of my answer is that it's more about students and teaching and supervision settings, but it might be also interesting for the research process. It's not from the paper we wrote, but we have like a little ongoing teaching project on like connected also to how students use AI. And one thing we see now, it's ongoing, like there's nothing published or anything, but one thing we see right now is I think connected to what Aisha said about dehumanization. So what we see is that students sit in the classroom listening to the lecture, and instead of asking a question when they don't understand something, they ask ChatGPT. So they don't talk to you, they talk to ChatGPT. This is what we see. We had some students doing observations, very cool. And also what they do in the classroom is like this student, this facilitator thing is like, they listen to a lecture and then they immediately start asking like, oh, how could I use this concept here for my term paper idea? How could I do that? So in the classroom, they immediately start like talking to ChatGPT instead of talking to the lecturer or their supervisor. Of course, they also do that still, but it's like there seems to be something going on. And I wonder if that is also something that might happen in the research process, but I don't know.
Thank you, Michael. And Aisha, please continue.
Yes. Thank you so much for, I would like to respond it in two ways, first for teaching and then for research. During teaching, what students do is really smart. They are just using the function of dictation in their system, so that they have every lecture dictated in their system, so they have notes. They are not taking notes, and then they are using that dictation for their assignment purposes, because they are supposed to use that those arguments which have been discussed in the classrooms. So they are using that function as well, so to develop their assignments with the same or similar arguments which their lecturers were presenting. And in research, there is a positive use, like I was part of ESIC, which was a kind of developing or creating infrastructure for evidence synthesis collaboration. And there we came up with the idea that research for evidence synthesis, which is supposed to be used for decision making, needs to be expedited, because there are certain issues where we need accelerated results. For that, like if a certain emergency occurred in one part of the world and we need to understand which intervention or what decisions should be made for that thing, so for that thing we need accelerated results, and for that we can have a collaboration with AI, but keeping in mind that human in the loop approach is there. So human is in the loop and looking after or oversighting the entire process of research, and then generating results which are authentic and trustworthy so that the decision can be made. So sometimes this acceleration is important for the context where decision need to be immediate, and for other parts where decision or there is not any emergency situation, and you as a researcher or a student researcher needs to understand or go through the process, their generative AI should not be collaborated with the research process, because then it is going to have a kind of negative impact on students understanding, because they are not understanding the process or not going through the process. So then we have situations where it is working in positive or contributing in positive manner, and in situations it is also creating troubles for students. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. I think I don't see now any other raised hands. So I actually think that we could now move maybe to Marcus for our concluding remarks, so that we can end on time. And if from that we still have some one or two comments made by the speakers, we can still allow it. But yes, Marcus, please try to tell us. So what do we get from this discussion today?
Thank you so much, Inga. Wow, just fascinating. And I'm still digesting everything. As it unfolded, I was, jotting some notes, and I try to condense them into just 4 minutes to flag to you 5 distinct points. The first point is convergence. It appears there is quite a lot of commonalities in these experiences from different countries, from different universities. Quite a lot of commonalities. The second point is patterns, about the types and the modes in which AI is being used. That it is so important to use very fine-grained research tools for studying GenAI in research and teaching. On one hand, we saw there is, the distinction about the teaching, the research within quantitative and the qualitative, between the math or the statistics. So it seems to be also very important to disaggregate the usage types along the research process, whether it is being used in the very process of creating hypotheses, designing a research project, collecting the data, analyzing the data, or at the very end, writing up the research. So disaggregation for fine-grained pattern analysis is important. The third point is about inequalities, how it can ameliorate inequalities or how it is reinforcing current social and educational inequalities. To what extent are biases being reproduced through the databases, through the LLMs that AI is using to learn and come up with the answers in often very lengthy algorithms that are not transparent to us. And also about the availability of the resources to universities, to the students at different levels of wealth, whether it's a rich institution that can buy anything they want, or whether they even struggle to have electricity every single day. The fourth point is there is a real need to do this kind of comparative and global analysis, that we do need to connect ourselves. Fifth, there is an urgency to identify the best practices, to identify the guiding principles. I'm not talking about any rigid principles that we need to identify and put into stone. That wouldn't work. It is such fast developing technology that we need to have flexible, guiding, orienting principles. Not something rigid, but something flexible, but something about the norms, the values that we want to consider the new opportunities. It's also about collective power, about creating some watchdog kind of ability, about defending digital sovereignty. And there's an impact not only on individuals, whether it's individual students or individual researchers, but also on the institutions, on the very foundations of what it means in our civilization to conduct research. So those are the 5 points: convergence, pattern analysis, inequalities, connecting ourselves, and the sense of urgency. And perhaps very finally, maybe we can also continue this conversation in some informal ways, and whoever is interested, we can maybe form a network to find funding, to form a kind of a exchange network on these type of issues. Since 2 hours, of course, is not enough to settle it out all. So let me now really thank all the distinguished speakers and the moderators, Inga and Lutfun, and also, of course, Alison, for making this whole series possible, and all of you for attending and for asking sharp questions, and for this wonderful event. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Marcus, for this really concise recap of what we have been talking. And I think we have 5 minutes, so I actually would like to ask each of our speakers to just tell the final remark before we close the webinar. So maybe Oscar and Ligia, we can start with you. Just the key line that you are taking away from our talk today.
In some way, the current situation with GenAI, and not only for research, reminds me a little bit of, well, I was not there obviously, but how it should have been with the steam machine, because at the very beginning, people did not understand that what these machines were doing and how they worked. People did not know, for example, that they could explode just because of water. And there is a need to understand what these deep neural networks are doing in order for us, and specifically in research, but for many other tasks, to utilize them better, more efficiently and ethically.
Thank you so much. My last remark has to do with students, and I was thinking along the following lines. There are some disciplines that use very intensively, I mean, not STEM, but other disciplines that use very intensively the computers. And I'm thinking about architecture, for example. And students in architecture are not allowed to use the computers, at least in some universities in Mexico, for the first 2 years. They have to do everything by hand. And it's only after 2 years of education that they can resort to the, programs and computers and so forth. And I think we need at least to reflect upon that, and maybe rule out the use of generative artificial intelligence for the first semester or 2 semesters, in order for people to acquire some of the tools and the capabilities they will need to use afterwards this generative intelligence ethically and critically and with a stronger reflexivity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ligia. Jens Peter, what is your final remark?
Yes, I somehow want to echo, but also oppose what Ligia just said, at least a little bit. I have, for the entire session here, I have written down on my paper calculators, because this is a little bit the same thing, that when you learn to do math, you shouldn't use a calculator, but then at some point you know how to do math and you can use one. It's the same sort of, but I think we can't solve it by prohibiting use, for instance, in the first semester or two, because they're already using it before that. They're already using it in high school and primary education. And I think this is also really important, that they're learning how to be critical users of AI already when they're in 4th grade, 5th grade, something like that, because they're already using it there. If not for anything else, and for fun. And yeah, so I think this is important, just like it's important to teach how to critically use your sources and be critical of where things come from when we have all this fake news and so forth. It's also important that children learn how to use AI, and we're building a new generation of AI literasts in that sense, I guess.
Thank you, Jens
We're the
Peter.
old guys.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Jens Peter. Aisha, please, your turn.
Yeah, sure. My final remarks would be to work on the ethical and responsible guidelines first. And with this, I'm not saying that our role as researchers or educationists or educators is reducing, but is increasing in volume, because we are now supposed to be more critical on the outputs submitted by students or other researchers. So our work is increasing in more intellectual and critical manner, and we need to have proper guidelines so that we ensure that we are not biased on our own selves. And we as researchers need to be ethical first, then to preach the idea.
Thank you, Aisha. And then I turn to Michael. So you kicked off our discussions, so you kind of close them up as well. So please, Michael.
Well, that's a terrible role. Thank you. I mean, thanks a lot to everyone. This was a fascinating discussion, I want to say that, and I learned a lot. Two things I noted down towards the end is the one thing is referring back to the calculators and the math and the statistics. And one thing I just wanted to mention is that for me, this also refers to the AI literacy part, because that, like, I'm not saying that you meant that when you said calculators, so don't get me wrong, but it reminds me of what a lot of our colleagues right now expect from the AI, and have ideas about what the AI can do. And calculators are a good example for, like, ChatGPT can't actually count because it's a language model. You can try that yourself, and like a friend of mine is actually a math professor. Like, she constantly makes fun of ChatGPT because it can't actually count because it's a language model. So then she explains like how you can actually use it for in math, of course, but it's like what you can actually use it for is often very different from what we tend to imagine, and I see that quite often. I have to say, well, that refers back to the AI literacy, which I think is really important, that we, like, even if we don't want to use it, like, get to like more and more trying to understand, like, what can you actually use that for, because for a lot of stuff you can't really. So talking about acceleration, I tried it out for a lot of stuff, And in many, many cases, it doesn't accelerate at all. It just gives you shitty results. And the other part is like, I want to refer back to the democratization. And there, like, I'm hopeful, but also a little bit afraid, because like, I think there is like a good chance for democratization when you look at like students, like let's say you have dyslexia or ADHD, like if you had money, like you could always pay for like a language editor, style editing, support, and so on. But now ChatGPT is, and we see some studies on that as well, like a chance for disadvantaged groups to like close that gap a little bit. But then, of course, you have also this like, and also like in academia, it's like, well, I'm at a Norwegian university. When I write an English language journal article, I just pay a couple of hundreds of euros for language editing so that it is good English. And I'm very aware that a lot of colleagues in a lot of other countries can't do that. So there might be a democratization, but also is of course, well, then you have some universities in very privileged countries who pay for like the super ultimate advanced package of AI. And some universities in disadvantaged countries don't even have reliable internet access. So let's see where this goes. This would be my last words, Inga.
Thank you, Michael. And we have exactly 1 minute to finish. So thank you all the speakers for this super interesting, engaging, thought-provoking, and many questions-leaving webinar. And thank you to our audience, and as well as ISA webinar group that helped us organizing it. So thank you all, and have a nice day, evening, morning, whichever time zone you are in.